your world, the world that you live in, no one else lives in it. And no one will ever know exactly how you see things, what you think about, or how you feel. Because each of us have lived experiences that have made us experience the world, see the world, think about the world in a completely different way. Today, I want to talk about the perception process because I really want to make sure that you understand the importance of how perception impacts everything in your life. But before I do this, I want to let you know that if you've studied listening and the model for listening, receive, understand, remember, evaluate, respond, the perception process, the entire 4-step process right here, actually fits in the very first step of listening, receive. So when I tell you that I'm going to teach you this 4-step process and we're going to go through and I'm going to help you to understand why all of us see the world differently, I want you to know that faster than I can snap, you actually move through the perception process. So let's go through the 4 stages of perception. The first one is selection. And so look around your world right now, right? There's a ton of things that are going on all around you. And you are choosing right now what to pay attention to. So if you're like me, you have your phone on your desk, you could be choosing to pay attention to your phone. If you're like me, you have pets running around the house and you're worried that they're going to jump in front of your screen, you could be choosing to think about that. You could be choosing to watch this video and to really pay attention. But you select what you want to listen to, and that is then what moves through the perception process. So we select what we're going to listen to, excuse me, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to organize that information. Now, each of you, almost all of you that are listening to this video, there are 3 ways that you organize information in your brain. Think of it like mail slots, right? Like at my work, I have mail slots. And so the information is stored in different slots. But we have a way in which we store the information. So in my mailroom at Miramar, it's alphabetically, right? Think about your brain. How do you store information in your brain? There's 3 ways. It's by rules, schemata, or script. Do you have rules? This has to go here, this has to go here, this goes here because it comes from here. Do you use a blueprint? So much like architecture, building a building, right? This goes first, this goes on top of it, this holds it up. Or do you use script? Do you use stories? Me personally, I store through stories. So if we are in a class together, you're going to find that I tell a ton of stories. Why? Because that's how I, in my brain, have stored all the information that I have there. Now, after the information is organized in your brain, you've kind of made sense of it a little bit. Now you're going to go into the interpretation phase. And this is why all of us see the world differently. Depending on, look at this slide, where you're standing, the 6 can look like a 6, or the 6 can look like a 9, or the 9 can look like a 6, or the 9 can look like a 9. We see the world differently based on our lived past experiences. Here's an example. Let's say you have a neighbor, Bill, and every morning you and Bill leave for work right around the same time. And every morning Bill says, "Good morning," and you say, "Good morning," and then you get in your cars and you drive away. But for the last 3 days, Bill hasn't said good morning and he hasn't responded to you. Now, there's something called first-order reality and second-order reality. In your first-order reality, oftentimes, when something like this happens, we think, well, Bill's mad at me. Or what did I do? Or screw Bill. I don't want anything to do with Bill, right? So, and we think that's our first-order reality, but it's not. It's our second-order reality. The first-order reality is just that Bill has not said good morning. But the second order reality is our interpretation. And that's where most of us place most of the value, not on what actually happened, but on what we think happened. Think about how you judge And I'm going to give you a simple example. This is a study that was done on the East Coast, and there was a group of people that were shown this picture of this man, and they were asked to identify like what they thought his career was, what they thought his personality was like, how would they feel if they ran into him. And so people were answering, and they were giving their opinions and giving their perceptions, and then all of a sudden they took the side by side and they let it go. And they said, what if I told you he was a prominent doctor that works in one of the local hospitals? And there were some people that were taking this survey, that were part of this study, that were actually shocked that someone who looks like the red shirt, the tattoos, is actually a well-known doctor. And I ask you why, right? Why do we judge people based on how they look? Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? And depending on what communication class you're in, you're going to get those reasons. But a lot of it has to do with cultural influences on perception, because the culture that we were raised in has taught us a lot about how we are supposed to interpret what people should look like, what they should wear, how they should act. You're going to see the cultural iceberg come a couple times in the course of this semester. And you're going to see me refer to surface culture and deep culture. And the surface culture is what we see, and the deep culture is how the culture, subcultures we were raised in, how they affect us. And the deep culture is what leads us to make judgments. So this is one of my oldie but goodies, right? Because here's two women dressed completely different and both feel sorry for the other. Why? Because in both cultures, what the other is wearing is seen as negative. It's seen as being male dominated, right? If I were to use those words. But it also is an example of us versus them. So in us versus them, we have the in-group or the us and the out-group or the them. And we in in-groups, we are comfortable with what is around us. We believe that who we are, the experiences we have, the way that we live, the way that we dress, those are the correct ways. And the out-group, being different than us, those are more often than judged. And you're going to hear the term ethnocentrism come around, and this is an example of ethnocentrism, but I just want you to understand that when you see someone outside of your in-group, so someone in the out-group, that you are probably judging them. Another way to look at it is really to look at the cultural vantage points. And so this is kind of a preview into next week, because we're going to go into this a little bit more next week. But there's different perceptions that we have based on actions and behaviors based on the culture that we were raised in. Interpretation is so much more than what I've covered in these last few minutes. And it has such an impact on the perception process, because you could be mad at somebody for something that they didn't do because your interpretation actually led to that. And that really is kind of the last step of the perception process, is negotiation. Because when we make those judgment calls, sometimes like with our neighbor Bill, we may talk and ask like, hey, is everything okay? We may find out that Bill's mother is severely ill and he just hasn't been himself, right? We may find out that Bill is really pissed off at us. But if we don't get to the negotiation stage, if we don't have those conversations, if we don't get the other person to try to see what we're seeing, if we don't try to get a shared understanding, then the perception process has actually negatively influenced our lives. The whole goal of this class is to get you to see that perception can oftentimes negatively impact our communication strategies, and being consciously aware of this can help us to be a better communicator.